Healthcare in senior care is fraught with problems and challenges, but we're also seeing some amazing new clinical treatments and resources. This show will help illuminate and uncover the good, bad, the ugly in order to equip patients, families, and other healthcare providers. Welcome to Senior Care Confidential.
It is a great day today. We have an awesome guest, my professional and personal friend, Tim Powell. He is with Senior Living Specialist, and we are talking today about moving your loved ones into assisted living. And sometimes there's some obstacles. And so we want to talk about overcoming these obstacles to getting into the assisted living that is best for your loved one. What better person to talk about this is Tim. Tim, I'm going to give a little information on you, Tim. Hi, Brian.
Hi, Joe.
How are you,
I'm
Tim?
good.
So glad you're here.
Glad to be here with you guys.
But we're going to talk about just a little bit about you. So, Tim, you were an ordained minister for 20 years, church ministry for 20 years. You've worked in home care, hospice, and memory care communities. So you are a certified dementia care practitioner and a certified assisted living manager. So you've got a big, broad resume. For the past 8 years, you've been working with Senior Living Specialist. Senior Living Specialist is really the top on the list as far as placement services in and around Dallas. Y'all are in some other cities too. They have placed more than 10,000 families in DFW finding senior placement for their loved ones. I have been one that's been a recipient of the services that Senior Living Specialist provides, and I can always count on this group. They do a great job. What I love about Senior Living Specialist also is they have 3 licensed master's level social workers. So what better person than a social worker that really understands that side of things, what is best for that patient. So welcome, Tim. We are so honored that you're here.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to just get started. So what do you find we're talking about obstacles to moving in. There's some conditions, disease processes that assisted livings are nervous about bringing someone in that might be too high acuity for that assisted living. So let's talk about, give me some examples of.
Well, it is very challenging because you have families who their preference would be for their loved one to be in assisted living rather than in like long-term skilled nursing or a nursing home. We just, in our opinion, we don't think the care in those types of facilities is very good. They typically have, poor staffing ratios and slow response times. But yet there are some clinical needs that are technically considered skilled nursing needs. That could be insulin dependent, diabetic, sliding scale insulin, having, feeding tubes, catheters, wounds. Absolutely. Yeah. That's a tough one. Also, the size of the patient, if it's somebody that's needing a Hoyer lift or things like that, those are some things that it can be challenging to find a facility that is willing to take them. Now, there are some assisted living communities that we consider to be like higher care level than others that will take on some of those things, but it's pretty few and far between. Most of them are just not going to touch that. So then the challenge is, what can we do, through our professional relationships, whether it's home health or care management, to try to, find a bridge somehow of getting that person from where they are now to where they would be a better candidate for an assisted living facility.
Well, and I know just, like my I've done hospice for a long time, and kind of like moving into an assisted living and getting better. Maybe somebody has been isolated because they've been living at home and they're not eating right and they're not exercising and they're not communicating. They're isolated. I know there's so many patients that are put on hospice and they improve. And so that's as a care manager, well, these are the things going on at home. My patient's alone. He doesn't have family that visits. He doesn't get to go to church. He doesn't he gets confused with the remote and just keeps the TV off. So moving to a community where you do have staff there, where you have fellow residents, where you have some family and camaraderie, a lot of times they can get better and improve because they do have that community, So just talking about, let's say somebody is overweight. Let's say they are 350 pounds, but they are working with a home health agency like Nexus, and they really want to lose 50, 75 pounds. Yeah. And so how do you address that with the community? Yeah. Yes, they are large, but this is what we're going to do to help in this situation.
Yeah, and letting them know that, this is a very proactive thing that's going on with this resident, that they are actively trying to lose weight. That being said, though, there is the reality of them saying, well, that's all great, but we have to be able to meet the need of the resident where they're at right now.
That's right. In the interim, how are we managing this when I've got 2 or 3 caregivers to do all transfers?
And if it's, if there's a Hoyer lift that's needed, some assisted living facilities actually do Hoyer lifts, I think as long as, they can provide the caregiving resources to be able to, to transfer that resident, if it's whatever their condition is, but, they're going to have to, at a minimum, be able to provide a 2-person transfer, probably more. Kind of like as you were alluding to.
So if you're, and I do see that. See, I'm looking at the client and I want them to have what's best. Yeah. So if you offer maybe to have hospice come in or home health or a visiting physician or maybe even a private trainer. I know there are physical therapists that do work privately. I'm just trying to think of ways that, and working with the dietary at the assisted living to make sure portions are smaller or, I just think there's so many options. The Ozempic,
I think that it's only going to help as far as the facility being willing to take the resident if they know that all of this proactive stuff is going on with them. That they are willing to engage with hospice, home health, dietitian, things like that. It would make the facility a little more confident, I think, in being able to accept them, to know that, yes, he is a Hoyer lift now, but the hope is that he won't be, at some point. But of course, it's going to be dependent on the person actually losing weight. So,
So in our world, obviously, when we're working with somebody, most often there's been some sort of an injury or illness that's occurred, and that's kind of the triggering event that gets us involved. As much as I would like to be more on the proactive side, the reality is a lot of times, the bulk of the times, there's usually something that's happened, unless they've worked with us previously and they're just kind of coming back to us to prevent it in the future. But a lot of times, my experience has been when they're looking to move to particularly assisted living, it seems like it's kind of an all of a sudden thing. It's like the one fall or the one illness happens, they go to the hospital, and then family members are stuck scrambling in a very short time frame to try to figure out, okay, what's the best setting, right? And who do we turn to? Is that what you guys are experiencing as well?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's never like a planned thing, like, hey, in 6 months, this is what I'm looking to.
It's always great when we have a family. I had one yesterday that reached out, and she thinks it could be a year or more before her mom needs to move, but she's being proactive. She's trying to get ahead of the game. She doesn't want to be caught in a crisis situation. And unfortunately, as you said, that's what we see most often is,
Imagine.
we get a referral from a rehab facility because, and it's like you said, those falls, just there is something about a senior taking a
It's
fall.
catastrophic.
It is catastrophic.
I know.
And I would say easily 7 out of 10 conversations I have with families, there's always a fall involved. But, mom fell, she was in the hospital. They had to do hip surgery. She's in rehab. We don't think she can return home.
Right.
And so they're, tasked with finding a place for her within the next couple of weeks.
So they have all the anxiety of the stress and the emotional stress of what just happened to mom.
Yeah.
And now we got to navigate the hospital system, which is a bear in and of itself. And then the transition from there to rehab and making sure that, the rehab's happening. I lived this. The rehab thing is going appropriately, right? Mom's being well taken care of, and so you have that. In addition to, holy smokes, in like 7 days, she's leaving here and I got to find a place to go. So that's why a lot of these places, I won't use their name, but there's national brands that are, heavily advertised here. If you go just look up assisted living on Google, I think they're like the top, 20 sites have those national brands on there. And the downside, I'll just share so you don't have to. The downsides of using some of those national brands is there's no local connection here. There's some local salespeople here, but it's really I've heard complaints about them where you'll put in your information on what you're looking for, and your phone will go off nonstop. Yeah. Right. And I don't think that they even tour. A lot of these places don't even tour with you. Or give them a guide. And so you guys are much, my opinion and my experience with y'all has been, you guys are much more of a curated, these are the ones we work with a lot. We know a lot of the communities around here. Yeah. There's been management changes on this one.
That's the type of thing. All of us on our team live here locally. I live in Dallas myself. So we're very personally familiar and engaged with all of these properties that we refer to.
Right.
And we know the reputation that places have. We keep up with staff changes, which can happen in a blink of an eye. You've got a new director or a new director of nursing or whatever. And so we depend on feedback that we get from families about places. So we like to say that we're picky about who we refer to. It's not just about plugging in someone's zip code and then giving them every facility within a 5 or 10 mile radius of that zip code.
Right.
That sort of defeats the point of using us.
Right.
Because we try to narrow down the focus so that, we're only providing places that are going to fit the criteria that we discuss with the family. What are the care needs? What type of facility are we looking for? Geography, budget.
Right.
We want to narrow the focus and in a situation like we were talking about, these obstacles, to going into assisted living, that's part of what we can help with as well, because we know the facilities that, I know Sunrise will, can do a Hoyer lift. Or can do 2-person transfer, or they can do insulin management, or maybe not so much wound care. But then again, that's where I can engage Brian. Can home health come in and assist with wound care management if the person's in a facility? And I guess that's kind of a question for you too. Do y'all do that?
We do it all the time.
Okay.
Yeah. And I guess, so kind of coming back to this whole urgent thing, the benefit of using y'all is that understanding the typical scenario that a senior and a family is facing is not like, hey, we have 6 months to plan for this. It's usually
it's a crisis.
It's a crisis moment, and there's all these other things that are happening around that patient, around the family, and holy smokes, what are we going to do? And then, but you guys, because you guys are so tapped into the marketplace here, you can kind of be the outlet of, okay, we got this, here's our top 2 or 3 places that we recommend. They meet all your criteria. They're already vetted by us, all that kind of stuff. And then if we need to utilize, private care management or hospice or home health, we can get those things plugged in for your mom and dad as well.
Yeah. And I step in a lot. I have where the adult children have never even seen the checkbook. They have no idea what's in savings. They have no idea.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I step in like, okay, we need to have a conversation here. What kind of budget do we have? And so many of that generation have no money, but they really do have a little savings, and you've got to get into that savings to help, and I always say this is that catastrophic time that you've saved for?
That question we always ask is, are there possible VA benefits? Because still so many people are clueless about the aid and attendance benefit, and it can be huge for families.
Significant.
Very significant for families to be able to help pay for assisted living. But you're right. I would say I talk to a lot more families that have budget challenges than I do that are just carte blanche, can just afford anything. I would love it if it was like that. But, very few seniors have long-term care insurance policies. It's great when a family calls in and they actually are fortunate enough that their parents have that, because most of them, don't, sadly.
So let's move on to diabetes. And, Brian was talking about the rehab, and sometimes you're in rehab and you've had surgery, and maybe during that surgery in the hospital, you wind up with an infection. So your blood sugar goes up. So automatically you're put on sliding scale. You've never been diabetic. You've never had blood sugar issues, but now you have this sliding scale and you're trying to move your mom into assisted living. And so you try to call the nurse, charge nurse, case manager, you're not getting return phone calls, and this assisted living, all they see is sliding scale. So that's where, working with your case manager, be sure you have somebody to speak with the doctor. Be sure you have somebody attend those meetings, those care plan meetings. All of these rehabs have care plan meetings, and you'd be shocked at how few will even are open to the idea of a family member attending the case conference. That is crazy to me. So I have attended, complaining, bitching, and screaming that I need to be in that care plan meeting so we can figure out what's going on. But a lot of times it's just simple having the community, change that sliding scale to either
sometimes
DCing or oral medication. That's right. Or getting home health involved so that we can wean off of that, and show, look, mom has not been on diabetic medication ever in her life, and this has just been 2 weeks. So I think that's one thing. It's a temporary thing. But the one thing I want to bring up too, I have had several very brittle diabetics that have had blood sugar checks. They've been administering sliding scale, themselves or a family member. And there have been such strides in diabetic care with pumps, with the Libre, with the Dexcom. There's so many strides that patients that are truly brittle diabetics can be in a community, and the doctor, the nurse, they can see those readings and the pump will self-adjust. So there are ways to work around that with diabetic patients.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's, you're right. The community will only see that sliding scale insulin. And so I think, part of the process in helping place them is also letting the community know, look, hey, they've been put on as a sliding scale insulin, but it's hopefully not going to have to be this way, and that's where I think you also have to have a physician involved, who's willing to make the necessary changes, to the diabetic management so that they can be in the community. Because most of them won't do. In your
experience with some of the higher acuity seniors that you've been working with, do you generally find that the smaller, sub 20 room facilities, whether it's like residential care home that does 6 or 8, or a more of a, I don't use names, but there's other models out there that's got, they cap out at 16 to 20 beds per building. Do you find that they are more apt or more better trained to take on these higher acuity ones versus like the bigger facilities, or is there a mix of both?
I it's funny. I've never really thought about that, but I think that's true. I think that the smaller, we would call them more boutique like properties, tend to take higher acuity. Like there's a one in Frisco that's like a kind of a boutique setting where they have like 16 to 20 residents in each building, and they actually have a building that's specifically for higher acuity residents.
Yep.
Certainly in a residential care home, will provide a higher level of care than you find at a lot of facilities.
Yeah, I think my understanding too, I don't run them obviously, but I work in a number of them.
Yeah.
My understanding from some of the owners that I know is that a lot of times the residential care homes will actually be cross-shopped with skilled nursing because they can kind of be that higher acuity and still qualify for some of these residential care homes. They don't necessarily have to go to, I hear your concerns on the nursing home side, like the long-term side. They don't have to be subjected to that potential. They could actually be in a home setting. With in several of the ones that I work in, they've got Hoyer transfers, they've got Serolift transfers, they've tons of wound issues all the time, some tube feeding things, insulins, all that stuff. So
and I had my mom in a care home before she passed away. Our owner Paul had his mom in a care home, so we think really highly of them, but they've gotten some bad press too. Some of the unlicensed homes, there certainly have been some issues, but again, we're extremely, especially with care homes, we're super, super picky, about which ones we refer to, and we know the owners, and we trust them and what they're able to do. But a care home can always be a good alternative to a nursing home. And people don't realize too that sort of again, we don't think the care in general is great in those facilities, but private pay is crazy in a nursing home.
What's it running now? Like 7?
It's
somewhere around
a nursing home is 15,000 a month.
Yeah,
on the skilled side, but I think on the long-term side,
on the
right?
skilled side,
is it that much?
It's 14
on the skilled side. But what about on the long-term side? Like if you have to go live there?
Oh,
that's what I'm sorry. I think it's around 7, right?
No, I think skilled. It's still
north of that.
It's still expensive, and so that's a residential care home can be a more affordable
like half
alternative. It can be half of what you paid.
Well, and especially those homes that are owned by RNs, physical therapists,
Absolutely.
That you get, you've got a healthcare professional that really cares.
And I prefer those.
Me
to
too.
Be honestly,
Me too.
The nurse-owned homes, just because I feel like they've got that definitely more of that clinical type oversight.
So for this, for the audience that will see this at some point in the next few couple of weeks, or even look back at this and view this, for the Dallas marketplace. So for 2020, we're in June of 2024. What would you say is a kind of the range of pricing for independent living and then assisted living and then like memory care?
So, with senior independent living, you have 2 types. You have the 55 plus properties, which are essentially
an apartment
for
complex.
Seniors. The meals are included, no utilities. They still have activities and opportunities for socialization. And then you have what I call the all-inclusive independent living. That's going to include your meals and your housekeeping and your utilities. So, it can start as low as around $1,500 a month for a studio apartment. I mean, the one that's just down the street from us where we're at right now, you can get a 1-bedroom for $1,700.
Wow.
And it includes everything.
Including dining?
Including dining.
Wow. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's kind of a, you get a lot of bang for the buck, I think, and it's a nice property. And then it can certainly go up from there. I mean, you can easily, some of these higher end properties, you can be paying $6,000-$7,000 for independent.
That's right.
For assisted living, I usually use depending on whether it's a type A or a type B, starting around that $3,000 to $3,500 mark.
And for the audience, the type A,
what's the difference between A and B?
Has everything to do with, can you get them out in the event of an emergency? Essentially,
technically, if it's a type A facility, it's understood that the resident would be able to self-evacuate in case of like a fire or whatever kind of emergency happened. type B, which is really a type B is what we think of when we think of assisted living.
Right.
That the residents are going to need some assistance. But there's certainly a place for type A communities. They tend to have more active residents, which a lot of people like, and they can be a little more affordable than type B. So at that 3,000 to 3,500 mark, and it can go up to easily 10 or 12,000 a month.
And then what about on memory care?
Probably 4,000 and up.
Okay.
And then but then you put that against a residential care home where, we can get, now there are some really expensive care homes too here in Dallas, but, you compared to memory care, we could find a private room for maybe 3,500 to 4,000 versus 6,000 or 7,000 for a memory care community. So I think there's a lot of value in care homes, but it all goes back, this discussion about, the financial part of it, the challenge of people being able to afford it, and those, I hate those conversations, because finances are just the reality. And when you have a family that doesn't really have an alternative rather than to put their loved one on Medicaid, I tell families, well, it is what it is, unfortunately. So if you're going to have to go that route, we don't work directly with nursing homes. We just know we know the ones that are at least better than others, or that we've gotten better feedback on than others. So I always try to be a resource for the family, even if I can't help them with placement. If it's a low income, if they're looking for affordable housing, we have resources that we can provide for them.
Awesome.
Certainly, professional referrals to elder law attorneys and care management, home health, things like that. So anything at all that I can do to help.
Because otherwise they have no idea where to turn to.
And in the end, it doesn't matter whether we benefit from it necessarily financially. We do those things because it's the right thing to do.
It's going to come back.
And it's always, always been Paul, our owner's philosophy.
So just quickly, because we've got to wrap things up,
Sure.
but I know feeding tubes, say somebody is in the hospital, they've been very sick and they've been put on a feeding tube just to get weight back, so what is the obstacle there? Is that a no for assisted livings?
With most of them, it is. And bro, I don't know what your experience has been in them. If you're seeing the facilities that will manage it, sometimes it depends on the type, whether it's a bolus or a pump. Feeding tube will sometimes go into the determination of whether the property can take it. Certainly, it's easier to find a care home that will take a feeding tube.
So those are the only ones I've seen personally
in care homes.
In the care homes,
and that's where we go back to the nurse-owned ones, because they will, if they have somebody who's on a feeding tube, they can actually train their caregivers on how to manage it. So I would say the vast majority of care homes that we work with are willing to take a feeding tube.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. And then what about wounds?
So, it's really the same with wounds, because, it depends on the staging of the wound, certainly. How much, like, even if you engage with home health on it, are they going to be able to, and this is a question for Brian. I mean, to what extent can you adequately manage a wound if somebody is in like a facility setting?
We do it all. We do it all the time. There are certain ones, I think was it stage 4s or whatever. Those people should not be. They more than likely will need like an LTAC, depending on how severe the wounds are. But if they're safe to be at home, like we see wounds, stage 2, stage 3s all the time.
And how often do y'all get out?
Depends on the wound. Usually it's between 2 to 3 times a week. There's a lot of times, especially if it's like a really advanced wound or it's one that's just kind of tricky and healing, the body's just struggling. Then we'll get like a house call wound care practice to come out, because they can do sharp debridement and help. Yeah,
that's what I like. Are the visiting wound nurse practitioners.
But they're only out there 1 time a week. So they have to have support from the home health nurses.
And
to help with
there are even care home owners that will have a wound nurse come to the care home to actually help with any residents who have wound care needs.
Well,
So,
and also, they can do training. The
Yeah.
visiting nurse physicians that do
Yeah.
those wounds, which I highly recommend, just so the staff is empowered and really understands what they're doing. So, well, we appreciate all this. This has been great. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, Tim, maybe they've got they're on the fence. They know it's time for Move Mom and Dad. What is the best way to get in touch with you?
You can reach me directly, by calling me. I don't, if I share my phone number,
please
but
do.
you can call me at 214-837-6052. Our website is just seniorlivingspecialists.com. We're happy to help. Like I tell families, really anything related to the senior health and lifestyle industry, we try to be a resource for. And if I can't help them directly, then I certainly have the professional relationships to put them in touch with people that can help them.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, y'all do a great job. We appreciate you. I highly recommend Senior Living Specialist, and thank you for your time so much.
It's
been great
being with you guys.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.